Jamaica's motto stands at out of many, one people. But due to statistical discrepancy, this topic has been much debated. Similar to what we see now with the third country nationals coming to Jamaica's as deportees or detainees. Most people would think that Jamaica is made up of Tainos, Africans, Spaniards, and the British people. But hidden in our history is the plight of the Indians, the Germans, the Jews, and free West Africans. They all ended up in Jamaica, whether by contract, against their will, or in World War II, where some came locked behind barbed wire cages. But how did these people get to Jamaica? Today, in our episode Questions History, we use the Mona Camp and the Coolie village to juxtapose and debate these questions. Journey. Between 1845 and 1916, nearly 37,000 indentured workers from India arrived in Jamaica after the abolition of slavery. They were recruited to work mainly on sugar estates under contracts that tied them to plantation labor. Many settled permanently, forming communities that became known as Coolie villages. Nearly a century later, during World War II, another chapter unfolded at Mona near Kingston. The British government established internment camps where civilians classified as enemy aliens, including Germans, Italians, and some Austrians, were held. Among those interned were families, single women, missionaries, merchant seamen, and in some cases, West Africans from territory under enemy administration who became part in wartime security policies. Today, descendants of both communities remain part of Jamaica's multicultural identity. So tell me now, have you noticed something? Even today, Jamaica continues to debate immigration, refugees, deportees, and agreements that could bring large number of foreign nationals to our shores. Every time one of these announcements is made, the same questions return. Why Jamaica? Why here? We're simply too poor. What impact will it have on our people, our economy, our identity? Those questions may sound modern, but they are not new. More than 180 years ago, the British Empire brought thousands of Indian indentured workers to Jamaica after slavery ended. Almost a century later, during World War II, Jamaica became home to internment camps holding Germans, Italians, Jewish refugees, merchant seamen, and other civilians caught up in the global conflict. So, different people, different reasons, same island. Were these decisions made simply because Jamaica was a convenient colony? Were they driven by economics as per today or by military strategies? Or did they just reflect something larger about the role of Britain and what they expected Jamaica to play within the empire? Today, we must remind you we don't recreate, we don't reimagine, nor do we rewrite history. We simply ask the questions that tells a cinematic story. Because sometimes the questions we ask about Jamaica today have already been asked before. And the answers may be hiding right here in plain sight. So let's examine the forgotten story of the Mona camp and the Coolie village. In summary, we saw where the Indian indentured migration took place between 1845 and 1916. We also saw where World War II internment at Mona happened in the 1940s, which bargains. Jamaican has always been the home of multicultural people. Question one, examine what happened, where it happened, and why did it take place. But now let's examine question two. What's the background to this event? And who are the most important players? Journey. The two stories began for different reasons, but shared one common thread: the British Empire. After slavery ended in the 1830s, plantation owners feared labor shortages. Britain turned to India, recruiting indentured laborers under fixed term contracts. Many hoped to improve their lives, though conditions were often difficult and wages were low. The Mona internment camp emerged from a different crisis. During World War II, Britain feared espionage and sabotage. Civilians from countries at war with Britain were often classified as enemy aliens, even if they had committed no offense. Jamaica's location and existing military infrastructure made Mona a suitable place for internment. Key participants included the British colonial government, Indian indentured laborers, Germans, and Italian civilian internees. Jewish refugees transferred from Britain, Jamaican workers and officials, local communities living near Mona and the plantation district. They all came together as one community and made it work. The exchange of new talents, ideas, especially in farming, agriculture, and one of the famous meals that Jamaican enjoy a lot today, or curry goat or curry chicken, were brought by these people. In summary, we saw where both stories were shaped by British imperial policies. Similar to today, government policy will determine who enters Jamaica. And similarly to those days, the Indians came here under indentured labor, and European civilians came here under the British war effort. But now that we have answered question two, now let's examine question three. What escalated the situation and what was life like for these people on the island journey? Life in Coolie village was demanding. Laborers worked long hours on plantations and often struggled with unfamiliar conditions. Some completed their contracts and returned to India, but many stayed, bought land, and established families whose descendants still live right here in Jamaica today at home. Internees experience a different reality. Though in prison, many camps develop schools, workshops, orchestras, theatrical production, gardens, sport leagues, and many other social recreation. Families try to maintain normal routines while living behind fences. Under wartime restrictions, these stories reveal two different experiences of migration, one driven by labor and the other driven by global conflict. But both required extraordinary resilience. In summary, we saw where plantation life was simply difficult for these new settlers. Many of them had to return home, but those who stayed became a part of the Jamaican community. Similar to the internees at Mona, they had built schools and workshops. And as the Jamaican phrase goes, they fit right in. But now that we have answered question three, let's delve into question four. What were the key moments, decisions, and turning point in journey? Several events changed the course of these histories. For Indian migrants, the gradual end of indentured immigration in 1916 marked a transition from temporary workers to permanent Jamaican communities. For the Mona internees, the end of the World War brought releases, repatriation for some, and life elsewhere for others. A number chose to remain connected to Jamaica after the war. One site later took on a completely different purpose. The former Mona camp became part of what is now the University of the West Indies, Mona, transforming a place once associated with wartime confinement into one of the Caribbean's leading centers for education and research. In summary, we saw where the indentured system ended in 1916. World War II ended the internment system. Many stayed, many went back home. But now that we have answered question four, let's now examine question five. What's the political, economic, and the human consequences of it all. Journey. These histories remind us that Jamaica has always been more diverse than many people realize. Indian Jamaicans have contributed to business, agriculture, politics, medicine, education, cuisine, and culture. The story of Mona Camp demonstrates how global wars reach even small Caribbean islands and affected ordinary civilians far from battlefields. Together, these stories show how Jamaica, as more than a colony, it was a meeting place of peoples, culture, and histories shaped by the wider British Empire. Understanding these chapters helps us to understand the rich diversity of modern Jamaica. In summary, the political history saw that the British Empire policies shaped migration and internment. Economically, the Indians' labor helped sustain the plantation economy after emancipation. Culturally, we experience new traditions, religions, foods, and custom became part of Jamaican life. As per human consequences, families endured displacements, uncertainty, and adaptation. Their descendants remain part of Jamaica's national story. History is often told through kings, queens, and battles, but sometimes the greatest story belongs to the ordinary people. Workers crossing oceans, families living behind barbed wire, and communities quietly helping to build a nation. The question is not simple. Why they came to Jamaica? The question is how Jamaica changed them and how they changed Jamaica. Now, if you have reached this far in the video, means that you or someone you know are interested in these types of video. Please leave a like, do share and subscribe, and join us again next time for another episode of Questions History.